He is vengeance. He is the night. He is one of the most portrayed superheroes in existence. He is Batman. Now there's a truism that comes with the announcement of a new actor to play Batman. At first, he's the worst choice ever and will destroy the character forever. And then, he's an absolute icon whose bat boots can never be filled. What does it take to end up as the moody superhero we all kinda wanna be at one point or another? The late 90s into the aughts was a rough time for handsome, broody young actors cast in culturally iconic franchises. Hayden Christensen, a Canadian actor, so therefore we're using the Queen's pronunciation of his last name, had let us know that part of what made Darth Vader so evil was his hatred of sand, and a young Robert Pattinson was introducing the movie world to sparkly vampires. Now, while girls and a disturbing number of their moms were super into Pattinson's turn as Edward the Vampire, the series was equally derided by the too cool for school crowd. Christensen has continued to have difficulty shaking some of the negativity that follow the prequels, even as opinions of the prequels have begun to turn around. Pattinson, for his part, had enough of the spotlight that came with the hit franchise and media scrutiny, even having a president weigh in on his romantic life, and decided to go small since he told Variety he's not comfortable not working. After turns in movies like Good Time, Cosmopolis, and High Life, Pattinson has managed to earn a reputation as an accomplished actor. But, as he'd soon find out, he hadn't completely shaken that sparkly vampire past. When news leaked that Warner Brothers was looking at Pattinson to wear the cowl as Ben Affleck was ready to step away from the role after only 2 appearances, the internet acted with reasonable deliberation and reserve. Which is to say that they started a Change.org petition for WB to reconsider because naturally such casting would ruin their childhood. At the time, he was attending the premiere of The Lighthouse, which was amazing by the way, where he was sequestered in a 19th century lighthouse with the Green Goblin and finishing work with previous Batman director Christopher Nolan. Concerns about Pattinson and Matt Reeves' new take on Batman, which looks to be so dark that you might want to bring a flashlight, have faded as the trailers have been fairly intense. Pattinson at 33 will be the second youngest Batman on the big screen. Seriously though, just that small part of the Batmobile car chase is intense. Before he got the bat signal, Ben Affleck had been around the business for a while, all the way back to Voyage of the Mimi, an educational program where young kids have adventures on a boat and then learn a thing about science. Eventually, he'd team up with Kevin Smith to associate the back of a Volkswagen Beetle with an uncomfortable space, and later as a comic book creator with Jason Lee in Chasing Amy. His breakout, however, was in the movie he wrote with his longtime friend Matt Damon. After Good Will Hunting, there were ups and downs for Affleck. His follow-up with Kevin Smith, Jersey Girl, didn't break through, and the romantic comedy he did with J-Lo, Geely, joined Ishtar and Waterworld as high-profile failures. Steady work both in front and behind the camera allowed the actor to claw back his credibility with Argo, which managed to win everyone involved an Oscar except him. So, when he was cast as Batman, the internet acted with reasonable deliberation and reserve. Which is to say that he too was the subject of a Change.org petition with 100,000 signatures compelling Warner Brothers to change their mind. Batfleck made his debut as a weathered and hardened Batman who was suspicious of newcomer Superman after his battle with Zod destroyed a fair amount of Metropolis. Part of the Snyderverse, Affleck's Batman was a darker version less concerned if the people he caught died. Both Batman v Superman and Justice League had troubled releases with mixed reactions that have become hard-fought battles with fans of the Snyderverse championing the preservation of Snyder's vision. Now, while Affleck had taken the role for his kid, he stepped away from the role because he wasn't having a good time and after a talk with Damon decided it was time to walk away. Affleck was set to direct the upcoming Batman movie before handing it over to Reeves and Pattinson and will reprise the role one last time in The Flash, which promises to be lousy with Batman. Just like the Flashpoint comic story, The Flash will also likely reset the DCEU and its troubled continuity. 2005 was a weird time for the superhero movie. We just didn't know it yet. It had been 8 years since the last Batman movie had almost killed the superhero genre. In its wake, Marvel was sneaking up, first with the major titles that they had sold to other companies. Spider-Man 2 had come out the year before, and Spider-Man 3 hadn't exhausted any of the goodwill that movie created. Likewise, the X-Men franchise wouldn't get its third entry for another year, so it was still riding high on its well-received second episode. For the role of Bruce Wayne, Nolan went with Christian Bale, an actor known for going to extremes for his roles, like losing a dangerous amount of weight for The Machinist. Chris Nolan would ultimately settle on his first choice of Bale based on the one thing that some fans have found a little amusing: Bale's bat voice. Swear to me! How did he keep doing that? Now, despite the 90s obsession with grittiness and extreme comics that gave birth to characters like Cable and Venom, who would both come into their own during that decade, there was a time when Batman's inherent darkness was viewed as a bit of a problem. Mostly because the primary revenue source for a superhero project was toy sales. If parents, the logic went, were unwilling to take their children to see the Batman movie because it's scary, then it might be difficult to sell Batman toys. So Warner Brothers turned to an actor that was both known for being handsome and debonair, but also they assumed universally beloved George Clooney, fresh off his star-making turn in ER. Rosemary Clooney's favorite nephew was cast alongside other assumed surefire bets such as Arnold Schwarzenegger as Mr. Freeze. The campy tone didn't line up with the movies that came before it, nor the audiences who went to see it. And that's before we get to the two most dreaded words in all of superhero costuming: bat nipples. The failure of Batman and Robin would also create a long moratorium on filmmakers trying to make comic book accurate looks as executives scrambled to figure out what exactly went wrong. Now, you might be forgiven for thinking this is part of the Mandela effect, creating a false memory, but no, it really did happen. Val Kilmer did in fact play Batman. The Iceman occupied Wayne Manor between Michael Keaton and George Clooney, where he was overshadowed by the biggest odd couple pairing of the 90s. The manic Jim Carrey in a role that makes total sense, the Riddler, and the stoic Tommy Lee Jones in a role that made no sense, an equally manic Two-Face. As you can imagine, Tommy Lee was not a fan of Carrey's antics. Now, Val Kilmer, it might be argued, was at the zenith of his powers. He had roles like the Iceman in Top Gun, Jim Morrison in The Doors, and everyone's Huckleberry Doc Holliday in Tombstone. Michael Keaton had decided to leave the franchise along with Tim Burton, unsatisfied with where the franchise was headed, and so Kilmer was selected as the replacement. That is, as soon as they could find him. Kilmer reminisces in the recent documentary Val that he had been unreachable when his agent was calling with the offer to be the Caped Crusader because he was in Africa exploring bat caves. And that wasn't as much of a sign as originally thought, however, as Kilmer lost interest in the role after one go, and new director Joel Schumacher was not terribly enthused with Kilmer in the role anyway. Now, before 1989, the superhero movie was a huge gamble. The last one to do it successfully, Richard Donner's Superman, had already jumped the shark and then swam into its mouth with its fourth entry. It wasn't certain that a superhero movie could be bankable. But then, a moody former animator from Disney had two amazingly stylized modern fantasies that almost resembled an Edward Gorey panel come to life. Finally, the world had a director with the visual eye to bring a comic book to life. And what better hero for his dark but playful gothic style than the Caped Crusader? Director Tim Burton tapped his Beetlejuice star Michael Keaton for the role of Batman. At the time, Keaton was known for his manic high comedy performances in movies like Johnny Dangerously and Mr. Mom. And fans responded to his casting with reasonable deliberation and reserve. You can see where this is going, right? Which is to say that they immediately became concerned that it wouldn't be the Batman that authors like Frank Miller and Alan Moore had rehabilitated into a brooding anti-hero, but a return to the campy Batman of Batman's past. Hey, at least they didn't have the ability to create online petitions. Decades later, Keaton is regarded by many as the movie Batman, and will be suiting up for the upcoming Flash movie. Admit it, it's been hard not to hear the word Batman this many times and not go, na Batman! Batman was a pop culture icon because of the wildly popular depiction of him that came in the form of the Dayglow and campy TV show. This Batman was more of a Boy Scout than Superman ever had a hope of being, and his violence was obscured by cartoony onomatopoeias. The sitcom parody was so popular, the network decided to air it twice a week, which quickly burned the series out. Cast at the center of the wacky buffoonery was journeyman actor Adam West, who beat out Lionel Wagner for the role after appearing as a James Bond-like spy in a Nesquik commercial. He was actually considered for the role of James Bond in 1970, but couldn't shake the campy Batman reputation. Hey look, we brought it back to James Bond. West would return to the role as a voice actor before we sadly lost him in Batman Return of the Caped Crusader, which I'm just gonna say is maybe one of the best Batman movies there is, but to tell you why would be a bit of a spoiler. Alright, when it comes right down to it, for a lot of fans, there is one Batman that stands cowl and shoulders above the rest. That's the one from Bruce Timm's Batman the Animated Series. Taking its Art Deco cues from the Burton Batman series, the long-running animated show became a defining portrayal of the Dark Knight, even going so far as introducing the fan-favorite character Harley Quinn. It gave way to the cyberpunk futuristic Batman Beyond, where a gruff-aged Bruce Wayne trains his replacement Terry McGinnis. Fans have been waiting for that live-action movie ever since. Bruce Timm was looking for someone who would be distinct from Michael Keaton, who was playing Batman in the live-action movies, and who would make a distinction between Bruce Wayne and Batman. After 500 auditions, one last test from a friend of the casting director's roommate, another journeyman actor who had turned to voice acting as a side hustle, Kevin Conroy. He would hit on the distinction that would define Batman for the next few decades. Batman isn't his disguise. Bruce Wayne is. Conroy continues to voice Batman on various animated projects, making him the person who has played Batman the longest. Now, if you're not an 80s kid or a fan of goofy rock anthems of that era, chances are the only reason you know the intro part to the final countdown is because Joe Bluth used it as his introduction song to his magic act in the show Arrested Development. It was a star-making turn for actor Will Arnett. His low and gravelly voice lent itself well to voice work, including a long and critically acclaimed run as BoJack Horseman, a deceptively deep story of a former childhood star in the world of anthropomorphic animals. When the Lego Movie pulled in almost every pop culture property of the last 40 years, Will Arnett's Batman managed to stand out enough that Lego Batman would end up with his own movie, giving us the second and third best Batman themes ever, Darkness and Who is the Batman? Now, where would the Batman be without the Joker? Well, director Todd Phillips decided to explore what the Joker would be without Batman in the standalone movie The Joker starring Joaquin Phoenix. Now, in this portrayal, Bruce Wayne is still just a kid, and the future Joker, Arthur Fleck, is an aspiring comedian with mental health issues in a collapsing Gotham reminiscent of the late 70s New York with budget problems. Unable to get the help that he needs, he descends into both his obsession with a late-night talk show host and his mom's obsession that Arthur is really the child of Thomas Wayne. Joaquin Phoenix had already made a name for himself disappearing into sometimes experimental roles, like his mockumentary with Bat brother Casey Affleck, I'm Still Here, which involved pranking David Letterman. The DCEU's Joker did not actually appear in a Batman movie, with Batman being too involved with the other marquee DC heroes. Instead, he was a guest spot in the Harley Quinn vehicle Suicide Squad. For the Joker's turn as guest villain, Jared Leto was cast. The 30 Seconds to Mars band member was also known for disappearing into his roles, most recently as an AIDS patient in the Dallas Buyers Club. Many of the on-screen choices for this Joker left fans scratching their heads, and many of his off-screen decisions, like disturbing pranks on his castmates, left them scratching their heads. Though, as is commonplace now, there is a suggestion that there is a redemptive version of Leto's Joker lost somewhere in the Snyderverse. Now, a lot of heavyweights have passed through Gotham, but none of them have won an Oscar doing it. Heath Ledger's posthumous Oscar remains the only acting Academy Award that a character in a comic book movie has earned. When Ledger was cast, he had moved on from heartthrob roles like 10 Things I Hate About You and A Knight's Tale to the critically acclaimed Brokeback Mountain. So, when Ledger was cast, the internet acted with reasonable deliberation and reserve. Which is to say, everyone lost their mind, declaring The Dark Knight dead on arrival, and of course, starting a Change.org petition to ask Warner Brothers to reconsider. Has a Change.org petition ever actually worked? Now, one person who was upset that he never got the call to play the Joker in 2008 was 1989's Joker, Jack Nicholson. By the time Batman '89 came out, Nicholson was a cultural icon, someone everyone had an impression of. He had graduated from surly tough guy roles to surly older man roles. Now, one thing he didn't seem to exude was a sense of humor, despite his turn in One Flew Over a Cuckoo's Nest. He was a serious actor for serious roles, which made his all-in performance in Tim Burton's Batman all the more surprising. To this day, his characterization has set a standard for the clown prince of crime. Now, there might not even be a Joker as we know him without Cesar Romero. By 1964, through a combination of the Comics Code and the current Batman writer just not liking the character, the Joker faced extinction. But then, a Hollywood legend would cover his iconic mustache with white clown makeup and help define the character. Less maniacal than he would become, Caesar's Joker was more of an amoral trickster who just enjoyed doing crimes and creating chaos. Now, he has come a long way from Tosche Station picking up power converters. Luke Skywalker actor Mark Hamill had a hard time emerging from the shadow of his iconic role for years, until he discovered the joys of voice acting. Mark Hamill ended up in the iconic role of voicing the Joker the old-fashioned way. He asked for it. After 6 episodes, the new producer on Batman the Animated Series wanted the Joker recast, and longtime comic book fan Hamill sent his agent to ask for the gig. He nailed the audition and has become the defining Joker ever since. The pattern seems to be that the more the fans object to the initial casting of a Batman actor, the better chance that they'll become an icon. Maybe there's a threshold where if the size of your Change.org petition reaches a certain number, you'll probably get an award for the role.